You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
All right, everybody. That music's a little different, as you can probably tell, because we're up to something a little bit different here. This is our first official Options Insider Election Night Spectacular. We did kind of an unofficial one back 4 years ago. It was myself and the once and future Dr. Bix, a.k.a. Mr. Rhodes, and we were kind of mainly on just to watch the markets for a little bit, have a little bit of fun. Little did we know what was in store for us that evening. So we thought this year we'd do it a little bit differently, do it a little bit more official, do it up for an extended period of time. So buckle up, listeners, if you are joining us now, because you got some content in store for you. We're going to be live for, looks like at least 3 hours, probably maybe longer, depending on how things unfold in the election. We got guests lined up, special guests lined up, pretty much every half an hour throughout the night here. So you guys are going to have a slew of content, a slew of different perspectives coming at you throughout the night. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from this fine network, upon which many of you will be listening to this after the fact, but can't listen to it right now. This is the live special. This is going out only via the Mixlers and our other live outlets. We'll cut it up later, maybe, into some nice bite-sized nuggets for you podcast folks, but we want this to be a special for you folks out there who can join in and tune in live, and I know a lot of you will be doing just that. So a couple of ground rules, by the way. You probably have seen a lot of other talking heads on a lot of other channels going on about how this candidate is great, this candidate is terrible, blah, 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 bias, rhetoric, all that stuff. None of that here. You're not going to get any of that here. What you're going to get is just the facts, man. We're going to talk about the results as they're coming in and what impacts we're seeing on the markets. Maybe we'll do a little compare and contrast to historical, what we saw back in 2016 versus now. Like I said, we have a slew of great guests joining me to help me do just that. And kicking it all off, who better to kick it all off with than my twofer from the Advisors Option Program. First off, joining us from outside the friendly confines of the continental United States, just a little bit east, a little bit adjacent, where we are joined once again by the Director of Risk himself, Mr. Chris Hausman, the Managing Director of Risk, as well as Portfolio Manager over there at Swan Global Investments. Mr. Risk Director, A, welcome back to the program, and B, did you do your civic duty? Did you vote, sir?
Thank you very much. I appreciate everything. Mark, Matt, good to be on this special night. Yes, it has been inked, but I will have a disclaimer here that I actually cannot be being a resident of Puerto Rico, I cannot vote for president.
I was just going to ask, how does that change now that you have shifted your domicile to Puerto Rico? So you cannot vote for president. Even though you are a U.S. citizen, you were born in the U.S., now that you have changed your primary residence to Puerto Rico, off the table. Wow, interesting. Quite the price to pay for that 3% tax rate, sir.
Quite the price indeed. You only have to deal with it once every 4 years, though.
That is true. Oh, what's that old saw? Taxation without representation? You guys should be up in arms.
Absolutely.
There in Puerto Rico. That kicked off a little thing called the American Revolution. And then going off to the state up north there, where they know a little thing or two about revolutions and the early colonial days of these fine United States. Of course, they're going up to New Hampshire, where we are joined. You call them what you will. You can call them perhaps the Oracle I almost said Omaha, the Oracle of New Hampshire. Oracle of Omaha is a different guy. The Oracle of New Hampshire, because he was kind of prescient on this whole vol thing, particularly as it related to the early days of the pandemic. And also you can call him the sharp-dressed man, because he is dancing away there in the ZZ's Top video, none other than Mr. Matt Amberson, the founder over there at ORATS. Mr. Amberson, welcome back to the program to you as well, sir.
I'm proud to be here to kick this off, Mark. It's very exciting. I took a shower, got my makeup on. My beautiful wife is handling the touchscreen states behind us. I'm ready to go.
I like that, the touchscreen of states. So you're going to be calling states live for us as they come in here. Speaking of things as they come in, as we're kicking off, we picked this time because this is when the polls first start closing out there, listeners. 6 o'clock Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. We are starting to see the polls close in Georgia, which has about 16 electoral votes, as well as in Indiana, has about 11. So our neighbors there to the south. Kentucky has 8. South Carolina has 9. Then up in your neck of the woods there, Matt, to Vermont with 3. And Virginia with 13. And, of course, setting the table, everyone was wondering what was it going to look like on Election Day. This is the day that, there we go, I like the presidential music, but there we go, that's a little better. This is the day that we have been prognosticating about for some time. The VIX futures have been prognosticating about all year, and we'll get to that in a little bit later about how accurate or perhaps inaccurate they were. But what was it going to be like on Election Day? Coming into today, the market certainly seemed like it had a bee in its bonnet. Most of the major indices firmly in the green. In fact, everything well north of 1%. The S&P, once again, the laggard, up about right around 1.75%. The NASDAQ at about 1.85% to the upside, and the Dow up over 2%. So another good day for the Dow. And the VIX coming into showtime, where at the end of the day, it was about 35.5, puts it down a little bit, but much higher than those vol prognostications we're looking at the start of the year. Let's go around the horn now. Our table is set. The meal is prepared. Let's begin in the land of the director of risk. While you're rubbing your hands together saying, woe is me, I cannot vote for the chief executive of the United States, what was catching your eye going into today's markets, and what's catching your eye now as the election process is unfolding in earnest, sir?
Well, I think the vol crush has started to begin. One thing that we're not noticing right now is that Election Day hump is non-existent. So you're firmly in backwardation right now, and it's a matter of time of just getting this one unknown out of the way, and then we can start focusing on, are we going to get stimulus? When is that going to happen? What's going to happen with the economy, et cetera. But I do think that the vol crush, at least in the short term, is starting. And like I said before, you probably should at least anticipate another 4 to 5 VIX points coming lower. I don't know when that's going to happen, whether it's in 1 day or 1 week. I guess it'll depend on, when we know who the next president is. But we're no longer playing with that vol election hump. We're back in solid backwardation, and it's just a matter of time to get some risk off the table here.
Yeah, they wasted no time in coming for this thing, did they? They set it up, like you mentioned it, that nice little volatility hump, as you call it, that election hump. And now here we are. The day is not even really unfolding. By the way, we do have some early returns starting to trickle in. Shocker. Matt, stop me if you have to just clutch your heart for a second. But Vermont, going for Biden. What a shocker. One of the bluest of blue states going for Biden. And, of course, Kentucky going for Trump. So those are some of the easy states to call. Of course, Illinois here, where we are right now in the Option Insider Studios, still has another hour or so to go on the polls. I'm sure the second those polls close, they're going to call us for Biden as well. We're a pretty firm blue state here, at least when it comes to the Electoral College here. So they're starting to make some of those early calls now, the easy calls. But the fun calls, the hard calls, still to come in. Mr. Matt A., how shocked are you that your neighbors there in Vermont went Biden? And then B, I know you track a lot of models and have been doing so for pretty much the entirety of the year. What's lighting up your tape right now as we are up against it, sir?
Yeah, that's not a shock that our friends in Vermont have gone that way. But, I use a lot of statistics, but the one I use to pick presidential winners, Mark, you might be shocked at this, but I like to look at and it's held true for many elections, it's the best dancer. The best dancer always wins the presidential election, and if you've seen Donald Trump's moves, you'll know why I'm picking him. has nothing to do with who I voted for or didn't vote for, but I think it's going to go that way.
As the man from the Sharp Dressed Man video, I would expect nothing less, sir. Your moves were pretty impressive. And what was that, a purple tuxedo you had going back there in the background?
Shiny. And that was the look back then, Mark.
That was the hot look in the late 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, my wife has some pictures of me in the Sight Out volleyball movie, so I've been paying her not to release those. But I know that you have a very crack staff there. So I'm a little worried, but one of the things that we do at ORATS is we develop this using the same earnings logic, to pick how much we think stocks are going to move on earnings, and we applied it to the S&P 500 and did it for the election. We started it, and back in September, early September, it was about 3.8% implied move. And it's slowly been trickling down to where now it's in the low twos. So, just the way that we look at the contango of the SPY and what we think it's going to settle down to afterwards. As Chris was saying, that contango, to me, it looks like there's a lot more than just this election. As a matter of, I'd go so far to say maybe the election is almost a smokescreen of things that we're going to see in the coming months. But just looking at the volatility, the landscape, and how high obviously vol is, but when you start to model how it will come down, it's still going to be at a high point. And whether that's people thinking that it's not going to be decided, much like happened in 2000 when we didn't get a president until I believe mid-December. That could be it. But I think we're going to get a president, and there's going to be a lot going on. So this is going to be a awful fun season, not just from the election standpoint, but it looks to me, just looking at the volatility term structures and volatility skews, that there's something else going on, and it's going to be a little wild in the months to come, Mark.
It does look a little wild. So I was just going to ask you, you beat me to it. So you are on the record then. You think we will have a decided outcome tonight, sir? We will know who the president is when we put our heads on the pillow.
I think so. I think it's going to be a good old-fashioned win for the Orange Man. Really?
For the Orange Man? You're calling for the Orange Man. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. So bucking the national polls, perhaps another surprise like we saw in 2016 going out there. So same question for you, Mr. Director of Risk. You don't have to pick who you think is going to win, but I'm curious, do you think we will have a decided outcome at the end of tonight? I mean, the markets, certainly, they're coming for it, so it seems like they're pricing in an outcome, even though, as Matt alluded to, there are still some outliers lurking out there. What are your thoughts? You think we'll have a victor tonight?
So I'm going to still base my all my answers on probability, and I think there'll be a 75% chance that we'll have a decided victor within 1 week, and 25% wild card. So I know if you look at the odds, they've been racing here, so far, for one of the candidates, but I still think there's a lot of unknowns there. I think, like Matt said, the volatility is showing one thing. We're going to get rid of this election, and then we're going to focus on all these other things. And so we'll see what happens, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a long night.
It is going to be a long night. If you want to play along in our polls, listen, we're going to put that out to you guys right now via Twitter to see what you guys think. Do you think we're going to have a clear-cut outcome? Mr. ORATS man saying yes, a.k.a. the Sharp-Dressed Man, actually going against the polls, picking, as he terms it, the Orange Man, which is interesting, perhaps a bit of a 2016 redux out there. Are you going to hedge a little bit like the Director of Risk and say, we're not going to know for a week or so, which would be an implied no for tonight, by the way, if you want to read into his tea leaves. No, he's getting the spirit of this. This is an election night special, and he's answering like a politician. So well done there, Mr. Chris. Way to hedge your bets. I think elected office is in your future.
Look, you've heard of the term better spread than dead, so I'm what you just said. I'm playing the spread here.
Playing the spread. You're just still bitter because you can't pull that lever for the commander-in-chief, sir. I know where you're coming from. I get you. All right. Speaking of where we're coming from, let's see where we were, our standings coming into today's show. In fact, coming into today, we talked a lot, and we said it in 2016. We've said it many times since then. Polls, not exactly the most reliable indicators these days. Just look back at 2016. So I've said many times on this network that don't quote me a poll months or many months or weeks ahead of the election, because no one knows. They can't even predict it the day of the election. But this is where we stood in some of the key battlegrounds and nationally coming into today. A bunch of people look at the averages of the different polls. These folks over here at 538 are the ones we were looking at here. But you can look at a bunch of different outlets to do that. And they looked at the national first. We all know how kind of misleading that is. Coming into today, coming into election day, the Biden had about almost 8.5% point lead over Trump. Nationally, is about 51.9 to 43.5. But as we all know, the battle really unfolds in those swing states, in those battleground states. So let's break down a few of those. Coming in, Florida, Trump had a slight edge, but a pretty decent one, about 2.3 points in Florida, 49.9 to 46.5. Trump leading Biden by less than 1% in Ohio. That's a key one. I know back in 2016, when Trump claimed Ohio, a lot of people started saying, perhaps this is going to shape up differently than we thought. Less than 1% point lead in Ohio right now. So that one can clearly go either way. The strange one, the really interesting one, is that Texas may be in play. Trump is leading by less than a percentage point in Texas as well, 48.5 to 47.5. I'll have to go do some digging to see when the last time Texas went Democratic in the presidential election. But that would be an interesting one if they swung that way. I know the demographics of Texas are indeed shifting quite a bit, but still surprising stuff nonetheless. Up here to our neighbors in the north there, Michigan. Biden leading by a commanding lead, 8.1% in Michigan, 51.1 to 43%. Wisconsin, our other neighbors to the north, other way around. Trump has a commanding lead, 8.2%, 51.9 to 43.7. Looking out in Pennsylvania, another battleground, a key one. Biden and Trump have both been there many times. Biden has a pretty clear lead, and that's not surprising. He's from that area there in Delaware there, 5.1% lead, 50.3 to 45.2. Biden, a narrower lead in North Carolina, 1.9%, 48.8 to 47 out there. Georgia, also tight, usually pretty reliably a red state. Biden actually has a 1.3% lead over Trump out there right now, 48.4 to 47.1. Strong lead for Biden in Minnesota, 9.3% for 52 to 42.6. About almost 3%, 2.9% in another key area they've been fighting over, Arizona. 48.6 to 45.7, Biden in the lead there. Let's go to one more. Nevada, 49.4% to 44.5, I should say, for Trump. So Biden has a nearly 5% lead there as well. Any of those numbers surprise you? Let's start with you, the Oracle of Omaha. I keep calling you that, the Oracle of New Hampshire. The other job's taken out there, Mr. Mann. Any of those numbers surprising you? Are you looking at your analysis out there?
No, that seems like we're going along the line so far, but I think what happens is, especially with the polls, the people that are voting for Trump don't want to admit that they're voting for Trump. And so the polls are going to be wrong. And, what I'm basing my analysis on, besides the dancing, is that there's just a strong majority of people that will look at, first of all, there's a strong possibility that the Republicans might lose the Senate and, of course, most likely lose the Congress. And people don't like to have all three branches go the same way. So that's one of the things I'm basing it on. And just the fact that how wrong. I called it in 2016 when there was no one that I knew was calling it. I don't know what it was, a feeling, or I don't really look at all the states and do the analysis like that. If you look at it right now, some of these websites are saying there are 2 million ways that Biden can win and 50 ways that Trump can win, and yet he won anyway. So call it a feeling, call it anything, but I think it's going to wind up his way. And And I think that a lot of people don't like what a Biden win would have done to the market, especially with the capital gains and the taxes. I think the market thinks that Trump's going to win. How about that, Mark?
Interesting predictions there. You're right. We haven't even gotten into some of the other ancillary aspects of this election. Of course, the Senate potentially up for grabs. The House, not so much, but there's a chance. I guess there could be a swing there as well. All eyes are really looking, of course, at the White House and indeed the Senate out there. That's where I think some parties are looking to make some gains here, or perhaps hold on to their seats out there. I was looking at some of the numbers for how many Senate seats are up versus how many are actually in play. And that latter number, probably a little bit more surprising than you might think. It's Mr. Director of Risk. Same question for you, sir. Are you surprised by some of these polling numbers heading into today, or is that kind of what you expected?
I'm not surprised. I mean, I agree. I don't really put too much credence in the polls. I don't think they're as scientific as they would like to be. There's a lot of variance in there, like Matt just said. So, and by the way, 1976 was the last time Texas voted Democratic presidentially. I am from Texas, so it's been a long time. That would be a tail hedge right now that you could put on if you felt Texas was going to flip. But as far as the markets are concerned, I think they just want to get this event over with. I think people want to turn back to the economy and to the pandemic and to all the other risks that we have to contend with, and why volatility is so high. Going earlier with what I said, I think 4 or 5 vol points is an easy play coming out in the short term. But then we're going to still remain in a 25 to 35 VIX environment, and that's very tradable. I think the market is going to be in a larger range, and it's going to be extremely tradable. So there's going to be some good opportunity coming down the road. And I got some data here since 1928, the day after a Democratic victory, the market on average has been down about 1.5%, whereas a Republican victory, it's been about flat. So from averages, I'm not expecting too big of a move tomorrow. The at the money SPX straddle, the 1-day straddle, was about 2.6%. Like Matt said earlier, it's been fluctuating all over the place. It's been like 2.5 to 4 the whole time, the last few weeks. So it's on the lower end, and I think it could be a ho-hum event for volatility. Unless, even if we don't know who's going to be the president by tomorrow morning, but there's some semblance of calmness, and when we're going to get through this, I think volatility is going to deflate in some way, shape, or form. And there was another good stat that I saw since 1928 also. There's only been 3 incumbents that have not been reelected, 3 instances, and that was Hoover in 1932, and the market was down 6% 30 days later. You had Carter in 1980, market was actually up 2.5%. 30 days later, and then Bush Sr. in 1992, and the market was up 3% later. So I actually, from the averages and from what I'm looking at, if Trump doesn't win, I don't think the market's going to move too much. I think we're going to go back to technicals again. We're going to go back to the economy. We're going to go back to COVID and what's going to happen. And we're going to get these cruise lines going again at some point, and we're just going to get rid of this event finally, no matter who the president is.
Interesting. So some folks have been billing this as perhaps the volatility event of the year. You're saying, not so much. Maybe a bit of a whimper, Mr. Director of Risk.
I'm going for the whimper. I think there's a lot of people out there who are afraid to short volatility right now. They're still licking their wounds from what happened earlier this year. And volatility isn't high because there's been a lot of hedging. Volatility is high because there just hasn't been a lot of people selling index premium, and you can see that in the VIX flows. I mean, there's just been all kinds of VIX flows with people trying to play the crush and volatility through the VIX, through VIX puts, because we know the VIX can't go to the zero. It's a safer bet. So I don't see the aggressive and the push in index premium right now, even though that the risk premia was at nearly a 10-year high. I think selling vol is, if you have some risk capital, I think selling vol is actually something that you take a shot at right now. You can't sit out forever. Selling vol is like a cat, has multiple lives. It will come back, even though 2020 has been one of the worst years for selling premium sometime. But the last 4 or 5 months have been an excellent time for selling premium. So if you were doing it correctly, so it's going to ebb, it's going to flow. It's about managing your risk, and there'll be periods where, short premium trade is not going to work, but over the long run, the short premium trade has worked.
Interesting. I know, Mr. Matt, that's a frequent discussion point, an analytical point for you over there, the land of VIX puts, sir. Certainly, they've been pretty active. We talked on vol views not too long ago. We can't remember the last time we profiled. We always break down the top 10 sizable positions out there in VIX land. VIX, obviously, always a call-heavy instrument, and this past week was the first time I think we've seen it in a long time. I can't remember the last time we saw. It's been quite some time where we saw 9 puts and 1 call in the top 10. So VIX puts pretty active, sir. What's lighting up your tape in VIX puts land?
Well, I love the VIX puts, and I couldn't help myself. For 20 cents, I bought some of the 30 strike. So that's what I'm hoping. I say they closed at 50 cents, so that's all right. But that's what is it tomorrow? That's tomorrow. So we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, just one day. I mean, tomorrow's my day.
A 1 day weekly.
Yeah.
30 cents. All right, so you're looking good. Close them out. Make some money on your election special, sir.
I mean, what could possibly happen? I mean, could they open this thing at 25 vol? I don't know, but we're hoping. We're hoping here in New Hampshire. Let's take a shot. What the heck?
Speaking of taking shots, a lot of you out there have already taken. Wow, this is surprising. In the early voting, it is exactly tied. We put it out there to you guys. We said, what do you guys think? Will we have a clear victor in the election tonight? And it just ticked. Yes, definitely, 47.2%. And no, it will take days, 47.2%. Only 5.6% saying, I don't know. Giving a little bit of wiggle room. Our producer giving our audience and out there, giving them a wiggle room of I don't know. I would have gone hardcore. Yes or no. Hold their feet to the fire. She's nicer than I am, though, out there. So what do you guys think of that, Mr. Director of Risk? They just ticked up. Yes, definitely, now in the lead with exactly 50%. So sounds like about half of our audience is hemming and hawing like you, Mr. Chris, and half of the audience taking a swing at the bat like Mr. ORATS. What do you say, Mr. Director of Risk?
I think your listeners are pretty representative of who's voting out there. It's just going to be a seesaw all night long as the results come in, and it's going to be 50-50 until the end.
Mr. Matt, does that surprise you? I mean, I know you went out there kind of early with a pretty aggressive prediction. Does it surprise you that our audience is about half away, at least, to maybe joining you?
Well, I think we have a very special audience, Mark. So they're a very smart and special audience. So I think that they're representative, but I'm still sticking with we'll know. I mean, obviously with COVID and the counts, that's going to throw a wrench in. There's a lot more people voting this year because of that, and so that could skew things. But I'm going to stick with we'll know, and I think it'll be a pretty sizable victory tonight, Mark. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, though.
I see what you did there. Some options-oriented puns, skewing things. I see. I see what you did there, sir. And speaking of doing things, it's time for us to do some stuff here on the old Superstar Special Spectacular as the clock is about to tick 6:30 p.m. Central. That means we are poised to welcome on our next set of contestants here on The Price is Right, and our next set of special guests here on the old Election Night Spectacular. Before I do that, we do have some polls closing pretty much right about now out there. So let's see out there really quickly. Well, I know, actually, Mr. Director of Risk, I know you have to go pretty soon. I know you have to drown your sorrows on not being able to vote for our Commander-in-Chief. Any last tidbits you want to leave with our audience, sir?
I'm going to live vicariously through you guys, so I know it's going to be in good hands. It's going to be a long night, and buckle down.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.